Thank you very much, John, and hello, everybody. Welcome. Glad you're here, and it's great to see such wonderful faces and people doing great work. I am just incredibly honored to be here. Just incredibly honored to be here. I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. John has just been fantastic to work with. The Asian Forum on Parliamentarians on Population Development is really lucky to have John. And it's just a pleasure to work with John and Moen. And on behalf of UNAIDS, from Michelle City Bay all the way down, we are just delighted to work with parliamentarians and working through AFPPD. We are very, very pleased. We're going to continue that collaboration. And thank you for your leadership, John. And then what a panel of parliamentarians. I feel really lucky that we're having this meeting in this beautiful city of Melbourne, and we've got some fantastic parliamentarians. Claire, thank you. You just spoke brilliantly, and I couldn't agree more about your comments about apathy and the need to keep things on the burner and to keep talking to people and keep moving the agenda. And congratulations on your appropriation and decision to fund the Global Fund. You saw yesterday evening Michelle City Bay really talking about that, and we know that our countries have benefited in this year's or in this tranche of new Global Fund monies. We have 18 different countries receiving about $500 million from the Global Fund. And of course, the obligation to the fund is to demonstrate that countries can use that and save lives. And the fund has the obligation to make sure that those monies, in dialogue with the countries, are being used to the issues that we're talking about here. So congratulations, Claire, and thank you for this good support. You may have also noticed that the Minister of Health from Victoria announced yesterday on the no longer decriminalizing transmission of HIV. And so that's a huge step. And then also Australia, in preparation for this conference, but just like what we heard from Nova, for many, many years, Australia has been really trying to work at legislation to eliminate travel restrictions. And Australia has succeeded in that. So they become one of those countries to move from red, yellow to green in terms of opening its borders and welcoming people living with HIV. In our region, we still have 4 countries in the Pacific. Nova, you were asking for progress being made. Well, there's some progress from Australia. We still have 4 countries in the Pacific, including Samoa, who is hosting the Small Islands and Developing Countries global meeting. And it would be nice if Samoa and 3 other countries in the Pacific could also change their legislation. And we also have 3 other countries in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei Darussalam, who still continue to have travel restrictions. And we look forward to seeing movements in at least some of those countries before the end of the year. So thank you, Lisa, or Claire, for that. My friend Silam, thank you. It's great to see you again. And talk about tenacity. Silam has continued to be the strongest advocate in the Indian Parliament for ensuring that parliamentarians are actively engaged in the national response to HIV. And I am confident that one of the reasons why India has had a 56% decline in new infections since 2000 is because of the leadership of the parliamentarians. And people like Oscar Fernandez and Seelam are 2 great examples of parliamentarians who have really stepped up and shown leadership. And we wish you nothing but success in the passing of the AIDS bill in India and as you move forward now with your new government. Nova, thank you for your comments. You must feel great. Just a few days ago, what day was it? I marked it down, July 8th. On passing the mental health bill after 5 years of long, laborious work. And, you know, Nova was talking with me a bit. It says, you know, there's not much difference between the issues on HIV and mental health. It's the same kind of stigma and blaming the victim and blaming people for their depression, for their bipolar, for their ADHD or whatever the issues are. Their efforts to prison reform. Some of the best programs in our region, I can say honestly, are in Indonesia in its work with the prisons. And too many of our countries are not taking a look at freedom from chains and how do people end in prison, how do they get there, and when they're there, they may give up, they may lose their right for mobility, but they never lose their right to health. And yet we know that prisons are an important place for HIV transmission, as well as oftentimes some very gross human rights violations. I was pleased to see that just 2 weeks ago at the UNAIDS Program Coordinating Board, which is chaired this year by Australia and last year by India, that on a session on social protection, we had a young man from Zambia who had been detained by law enforcement authorities and imprisoned for nearly 6 years before his case went to court and he was found innocent. And yet he had spent 6 years of his life, and as a result, he came out not embittered, but he came out impassioned to work on HIV based on his experiences and what he saw and what he witnessed during his 6 years in detainment. So good on you. And it's great to see that countries like Indonesia, like the Philippines, have this year committed themselves to universal health care, and how important it is to find a place for HIV care and treatment within UHC. And then to the newest member of Parliament, thank you, Rajiv. It's fantastic to see young, bright parliamentarians like yourself come on board. And already you sound like somebody who's been in Congress for a long time, because the way that you are working with national authorities, with the government, with civil society, I think that's fantastic. That, as John mentioned about your first or second night here in Melbourne, he's out wining and dining the transgender and gay community to listen to them, to understand, to walk with them. And I think that that's an example of fantastic leadership. That is not a sign of weakness or perversion. This is a sign of integrity and a commitment to be a quality leader, not just to hold an office. So good on you, and we look forward to working together with you. I know that we want to have a discussion, and I think that that's very good, and I don't want to talk too long, but I think it's good to acknowledge the leadership that we have here. And I just also want to just mention Louise Pratt. It's great to see you here. It wasn't so many months ago. I think, 2 years ago when we met in Bangkok, and the ASEAN member states called together a meeting of parliamentarians, and Louise came and joined us, and that was organized by AFPPD. And together we had an amazing week-long dialogue on the role of parliamentarians in HIV. And Louise came for that. And the way that she spoke about her own personal life and why she chooses to continue to speak up about difficult issues, not just within her own country, but within the region and globally. In 2011, when we had the high-level meeting in New York, and we committed as 193 member states of the UN to ending AIDS, Louise was there as part of the Australian delegation. And she made sure that key issues were included in that declaration. So that's the kind of leadership that maybe begins with your local electorate, but has huge implications for how we move forward at country, at region, and at global levels. I don't need to tell you this because it's already been clearly demonstrated, but the role of parliamentarians is crucial. On 5 key areas, and I'll just quickly mention them. Obviously, we need the role of parliamentarians in creating fair and just laws that are responsive to the needs of community. And I think your dialogue in Nepal is an example of being brave and honest and reflecting the lived realities of communities. So ensuring legislation that honors people not just as male or female, but also as transgender. And in our region, we've made some progress on this, but we've also made some regressive moves. And so we know that there are countries that are moving forward, but in the last year, I think that we can say we've made some progress, but not as much progress as we need. A second key area for the parliamentarians is appropriations, the Ways and Means Committee, making sure that the money is there to make a difference. And I couldn't agree more that as we move forward, we need to fund the fund, but we also need to make sure that national programs are getting funded and that monies are put into the communities and into the government ministries that can make a difference. And so this role of appropriations is crucial. In our region, the vast majority of the national response in Thailand, Malaysia, China, and India comes from national resources. In Indonesia, it's about 40% from national resources. And local communities can help drive that agenda. In other countries, we're almost 100% dependent on external funding. So the role of appropriations for parliamentarians. Thirdly, on oversight, making sure the money is working, making sure that it's reaching to the people. And there's no better way than to visit the prisons, to visit the sex workers, to visit the MSM community, to visit people in the prisons, to address migrants and to walk with them and to hear their voices as they move from countries to countries and back again. What has been their lived experience and how well are these programs working for the people? Then fourthly, leadership. And again, I applaud you. Obviously, we have 5 great leaders here and others in the audience. But that leadership, of course, leadership is listening to your constituency and then trying to articulate their views. But it is also true that you can shape public opinion. And as we heard from former Chief Justice Michael Kirby last night, there's a man who changes the equation by challenging countries and individuals and communities to be more just, more honest, more inclusive. And so as your role as parliamentarians, such an important role as leaders. And then finally, to ensure that whatever we do at country level is always rights-based and evidence-informed. And to challenge those things when violations are taking place. That's what we heard about prison reform. That's what we heard about mental health patients being locked up in prisons and getting their chains off. It's to ensure that we can't hide behind the fact that we're elected officials and that we can speak with immunity. We need to be able to challenge laws that are unjust. In our region, we have great examples in New Zealand and in Australia where sex work has been decriminalized, and to some degree in certain parts of Indonesia as well. But in too many of our countries, the vast majority of countries still consider consensual sex between adults in private as against the law. And so we have a long way to go. And Nova, you're correct. We haven't made as much progress on that as we need to make. Although I must say, we have the president of Fiji here. And as you may know, he is very keen to move forward on decriminalization of sex work in his home country of Fiji. Yeah, it's great effort on his part. So this effort about moving forward on key populations and making sure the laws are working for people, so crucial. Let me end then by just saying that in addition to the areas that we've talked so much about, and correctly so, welcome. Very good to see you, my brother. I want to just quickly end by saying, of course, we're going to continue to work and focus on what we know is driving the epidemic in our region. It's men who have sex with men, it's people who buy and sell sex, it's people who inject drugs, and it's transgender populations. But we also know that we need to expand that a bit, and we heard Michelle Sidibe talk about that, about prison populations, about migrants, about people with disabilities, about people who are moving across borders. These are the populations that we need and need to include and to reach out to. And finally, I want to say thank you for these efforts to take HIV and include issues like hepatitis B, like hepatitis C, like HPV vaccine. We have a vaccine out there that prevents cancer in women. And how important it is that that vaccine should be made available to every young girl in our region. We know that we have to drive down the drug prices, both for ARVs, for technologies like for checking our CD4 counts and for viral loads. We know we have to continue to drive down hepatitis C treatment. In my country, hepatitis C treatment costs almost $90,000. And yet Egypt has been able to negotiate a public sector price for $800. But even $800 is still too much, and we have to drive down that price. So let me end by just saying thank you. I know we want to have comments, questions, and answers. As we move forward in Asian Pacific, we need the community, we need government leadership, but we need, and we have, in many examples, and we've seen some wonderful ones here today, the role of parliamentarians and legislators. Thank you so much.